Good morning, everybody. Wonder where this lesson will take us today. I am not sure exactly what will unfold, but I am sure that it will be unfolded. We have covered a lot of information, a lot of figures. Wonder if anyone has any questions about anything that we've talked about thus far, or about anything in general, as we are want to do. Any questions? We're open to any questions. So, any thoughts, questions, concerns, comments?
This is Audrey. I have a question.
Yep.
In thinking about what we've been talking about Keturah and Hagar, I just was wondering, it just got me thinking, I was wondering, are Lilith and Eve aspects of the same person? That's what I was wondering about.
I believe we talked about that.
Not the same person, but the same persona.
I believe we talked about that briefly at one point in time. The attributes, I believe, are the same in terms of duality. The attributes, one is dark and one is with dark, meaning not ripe, and the other was ripe. And I don't want to get into a lot of that today, because I think it'll take us off base. But anyone else with any thoughts about that?
I agree that it definitely will take us off course if we get into the weeds on that, because very few people have read about it, and to explain the concept that's put forth by the sages and other writers would take us a different place, because basically Lilith is Eve's alter ego. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Other questions? Audrey?
Well, I know we talked about them before, but we talked about them in the sense that they were two separate entities. But I'm just curious as to whether or not they were aspects of the same, opposite sides of the same entity.
And I believe they were. They were just different aspects of the same entity. Particularly as we learn more and more about the fact that there really is no separateness and we are all one entity. Yes.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. Other questions? Comments?
Barbara, this is Ron. On last week, we talked about you mentioned Sarah and the Hagar away, and part of the significance of that, and it just lines up with portions that we've missed in the past, and looking at the significance of the feminine. Energy, her relationship with Hagar and Abraham, but it is on a broader sense. It talks of
Ron, you're cutting
Right.
in and out, and so I'm not catching what you're saying. Ron? Okay. Ron was going to make a comment, but I'll wait until he patches back in. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll move on until Ron gets, that might be him now. I'll move on until Ron gets back in then. So one of the things that we started talking about as Ron was getting ready to intimate was that a lot of times we talk about the tribes, we talk about the lineage of the Messiah, but we have not emphasized as much the feminine energy that was involved in very distinct ways in unfolding this story, this saga, this building of this nation. And so, yes, Sarah, as the matriarch, was intimately involved, but so was Hagar, as another aspect of feminine energy as well. And you will see through the lineage, and not only with Abraham, who had, as you remember, we said total of 8 sons, Isaac by Sarah, and then Hagar / Keturah, Ishmael, and six others. But also Jacob, as well as Isaac. Isaac with Rebecca. Rebecca was tantamount and was intricate to the plan that the lineage be transferred through the line of Abraham directly, and through his designated sons. And those sons were designated by the Creator. And then finally with Jacob, and wow, things just blossomed with Jacob as it relates to the relationship of feminine energy and masculine energy. Jacob not only had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, but he also had children by their handmaids as well, by Bilhah and Zilpah. Ron, are you back in yet?
I am. I came back in on Zoom this time. Is that better?
That's much better. I was just prefacing where I thought you were going, so I'm going to let you go ahead and make your comments.
Well, I was just, in thinking about what you said last week when you were looking at the role that Sarah played in her relationship with Hagar. What it kind of showed me, opened up rather, was the masculine energy of the men in these scriptures seem to represent the law, whereas the women represent the spiritualness of it, or the tying in of what needed to be done based on spirituality. For example, we talked about the role of Rebecca and Isaac trying to follow the law. Isaac could only see or have visions for the law, and Rebecca had the spiritual insight to see further. And so it looks as though they're out of balance, but it is not. And something similar happens with Abraham and Sarah when she sends Hagar away. So it takes that burden away of him dealing with Ishmael as his older son and dealing with it from a lawful perspective. So when we read that he gave everything he had to Isaac, it just kind of shows that the role that she plays in there had more of a significance than we originally thought, in just reading it on the surface. That's all.
Right. Thank you, Ron. The role that all of the feminine energy aspects of those who built this nation, this people, was much more significant. As I said while you were attempting to get on, that we often talk about the lineage. We talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but we rarely talked about the what the feminine energy contributed to the building of this nation. And so, thank you for your comments. The feminine aspect of this patriarchy and matriarchy. It is said that the women were prophetesses, and that in many cases Sarah was able to see further, quote, see spiritually further than Abraham. And as we can see, Rebecca also was able to see, as you said, further than Isaac. Isaac was very much a law abider, but Rebecca was able to see the intent behind what God had promised, what the Creator had promised. So as we develop this, then we've been on the precipice of getting to Jacob and Jacob's sons with his wives and handmaidens for a couple of sessions. So are we ready to move on to that today? Any other questions? If you do have questions, that even after I get started, if you have questions that pertain to anything that we've talked about, as you know, feel free to stop and ask them anyway. It doesn't matter that we've prepared to do something. As we know, the questions are what drive the discussion as well, and oftentimes lead us into even more insight and depth. Okie dokie. So we're at the point where Jacob, where Rebecca was saying, "You got to get out of here." Esau has murder on his mind. He intends to harm you, and Rebecca loved both Esau and Jacob. That doesn't mean she didn't love him, but what she wanted to do, didn't want to lose two sons. She didn't want to lose Esau, and then subsequently Jacob, and she didn't want Esau to be a murderer either. And so she talked with Isaac, and they decided to send Jacob on to Jacob's father's people, to Sarah's people. Now, if you'll remember, when Isaac was seeking a wife, when Abraham was seeking a wife for Isaac, he told Eliezer, "No, do not send Isaac at all to my people. Do not send him. God said that he would inherit this land. Do not send Isaac at all. And if you go and you can't find anybody for Isaac, then you're absolved. You do not have to keep your oath to me to bring Isaac's wife back from my father's people. But do not send Isaac there. Yet, on the other hand, here we have Jacob. And Isaac was saying, okay, he agreed with Rebecca. Yeah, let's send him out. I do not want him to take a Canaanite wife. I agree with you, Rebecca. And so they did so. And if you will remember, they sent him out, and Rebecca said, go for a couple of days or so until your brother stops being as enraged or as angry with you. And that 3 days or so turned into 20 years plus. Shortly after Jacob left, this is when he wrestled with the angel. And I'm not going to go into detail about that unless you have specific questions, because I want to get into the births of Jacob's children after he marries. Anyway, he wrestles with the angel, and this is where the angel struck him in the hollow of his thigh. And some think it's the sciatic nerve that was involved. And I don't know if you all have ever had a sciatic nerve pain, but wow, once that strikes you, I mean, it gives you a big limp. You're hardly able to walk. But the tradition says that it was the sciatic nerve that was involved, that the angel struck him in the sciatic nerve. But Jacob said that he'd seen the face of God, and God had saved his life. And so he named that place, but he had a limp afterwards. Yes, sir.
Jacob wrestling with the angel. Looking at it spiritually. Jacob wrestling with the messenger. Wrestling with whether or not he was going to not only engage the message, but follow it. And when he was touched by the message, what did the message do? It crippled him as a reminder of what had taken place there at Bethel. Could that possibly be that Jacob's wrestling was an internal thing where he was trying to hold on to the belief that he had versus those of the Creator. And in struggling with that, the idea of him having a limp or being touched in such a way that will cause him to limp is speaking to the continued struggle that he had as a reminder of what he was brought into the earth to do. And he never really came to grips with the message that was clearly being delivered to him. Does that make sense?
I hear you, and I agree with you. And this was I got this out of order because this was just before Jacob was going to was going to see Esau as well. So some of it related to what had taken place with Esau and so it was a combination of things. So I do agree with you. Yes, he had not at this point reconciled who he really was at this point.
So that would be no different than the struggle that we had making a decision to enter this journey to enter this journey of spirituality versus religion, and they're in doing that engaged in a struggle, and the lengthen came from trying to carry the load of both until we got to a point where that was no longer the case. We began to offload religion. Yet there are those who listen every time we are on, those with whom we speak face to face are still struggling with that. As was Jacob, they continue to limp, and that limp is trying to live in two worlds, a world of spirituality and a world of physicality, which is religion. So I'm done.
And it's sort of similar to what that concept we talked about, being unequally yoked. What are you yoked to? When you're trying to struggle and bridge two different worlds, it is not easy. And you've not made up your mind that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's not easy. But as I said, what I did was I hopped ahead, so I want to come back. I hopped ahead just before Jacob was to meet Esau. So I want to come back to chapter 28 when Isaac charged Jacob and told him, go to Canaan. I'm sorry, do not get a wife from Canaan. So Jacob then went out to Isaac's, headed toward Isaac's home to seek a wife. He rested on a place called Beersheba as he was going to Haran, which is the home place of Isaac. And there he fell asleep, and that's when he saw this concept of a ladder and angels descending and ascending, going up and down. And what he said was, he named that place Bethel, because he said that surely the Lord is in this place. And so he set that rock that he had laid his head on as a pillar, as a memorial to naming that place and understanding that his Creator was with him. And he made a vow here. He says that if God is with me, and if he gives me bread to eat and clothes to wear, and if he brings me back to my Father's house in peace, he'll be my God. And the other thing that we don't often get is he says, and all that I have, I will surely give the 10th to thee. And so he, as part of his promised to tithe as well. Jacob went into the land, went into Haran, went to, there were foxes in the land, and he asked about for Laban, asked the folk, some fellows that he saw near the well, if he knew Laban. They did. They said, yeah, as a matter of fact, there's his daughter right there coming and bringing the sheep to be watered. And so Jacob says, well, why don't you water them then? You can always take them on back and let them graze some more. And the fellow said, no, we usually bring them all in. We bring all of the sheep in to be watered at the same time because, that stone that's covering the well is just so heavy that, we just do it one time and get it over with. Well, what happened was when he saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, who was, if you remember, was his mother's brother. Jacob went and wherever he got the strength from, he rolled a stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock. He then was forward and kissed Rachel, and he cried because he was he fallen in love with her, and he was thankful that he had found her. So Jacob told Rachel he was Rebekah's son. She went and told Laban, and hello? Sorry, let me decline this call. Okay. He went and told Laban, Rachel ran and told Laban about it, and Laban had two daughters. And when Jacob told him what he came for, etc., I'm coming to get a wife. He agreed that he would serve Laban 7 years, and he specifically said, "I'll serve 7 years for Rachel, the younger daughter." Particularly when he found out there were two daughters. So he did, and the Bible talks about 7 years being as a day or so, a couple of days. It went by so fast that Jacob did not see that it was a task for him to serve Laban in order to obtain Rachel. And so he says, "Okay, I've done my time, if you will. Give me Rachel to wife." And so Laban said, "Okay, prepare for the feast, everybody." And they did. And what happened was Laban deceived Jacob. Jacob went in. And the next morning when he arose and there was light all around, he could see that it was Leah that he had married and not Rachel. And so he found that Laban had tricked him. This was very similar. I think Charles brought out last week that Jacob was tricked just like he tricked his brother out of his birthright and his blessing. So same thing was done similarly to Jacob. And what we're going to learn later is that this really was in the plan as well, in terms of the Creator and what his intent for Jacob, because he had promised that he would make a great nation out of them. So anyway, Jacob said, "Okay, I want Rachel. That's who I agreed. You've given me Leah. I'm married to her now." So Laban said, "Okay, do your 7 days." What they did was they did 7 days of celebration as a result of the wedding. He says, "At the end of the 7 days, I'll give you Rachel to wed as well. And then you can, if you work 7 more years for me, that'll take care of sort of like your what you agreed to do in order to obtain Rachel as a wife." And so that's what occurred. Jacob did his 7 days of celebration with Leah, and then he was married to Rachel as well. Then he married Rachel 8 days after he married Leah. Then Jacob began this additional 7 years of work for Laban. Yeah.
So Jacob was living up to his name in reverse, in that he was continually deceived because he was a deceiver.
Yes.
Because you remember when he was told by the Creator that not to worry when he meet Esau?
Yes.
And he got to the back of his caravan and put someone else on the front because he was afraid Esau was going to kill him. Even though he had heard what the Creator said, he still didn't do it. So if we look at us now, this speaks to all those times that we've heard people make that commitment. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to give you a tenth of everything. I'm going to trust you, and then turn right around and do something opposite of that. Not saying they don't believe in the Creator, but not being committed to what they promised the Creator, to the extent that they follow what they said. And Jacob, being in that position, says to me that Jacob was more a progenitor of religion than he was of spirituality. He was more committed to religion than he was to spirituality, or more committed to physicality than spirituality. He wanted what he wanted.
And it wasn't just Jacob. I mean, even Abraham, when the Creator told him that He would protect him, and he went to Egypt, and Abimelech, and both times said that his wife was his sister, because he was afraid. He feared for himself. And Isaac did the same thing with Rebekah. He told Abimelech that was his sister. He feared for himself. And so what I hear you saying is that even in the midst of the promises of God, there's this part of us that sometimes fears in spite of. And we as you say, we say we're going to be committed, but something happens and it causes us to fear in spite of what we've been told, in spite of what we know.
And that continues until we get to a place where we get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And at that point, regardless of the outcome, we follow what we hear. We follow what we know to be true. And even doing that, there are periods when we have to exercise the principle of being my brother's keeper, because all of us need the embracement and encouragement from each other to stay the course. I'm done.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay,
now, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, while we're talking, I guess discussing this, I want to look at again further, deeper anyway, Rachel and Leah. So what I'm seeing, and I'm not seeing this clearly, I'll admit, he's coupled with, he's seeing his feminine side. Rachel, he sees and he loves automatically. So I'm looking at what Pastor said. This is the part of him, that the natural part of him that he sees, and that's what he wants, what he sees, the beauty of her. Leah being what is needed for him. So he's coupled with both of those things. And ironically, he's coupled with what he needs first. So with 8 meaning the fatness of a new beginning, that's when he gets the part that he wants. And like I said, it's something that I guess I'm not quite seeing. I'm just trying to talk it out. But, the two of them together bring him balance. And it's speaking, it's speaking more to what becomes of him, more so than just looking at him having 2 wives. There's something I just don't want to miss in seeing that. There's something more being said there. And if somebody else sees it.
Rachel represents physicality. What you see with your eyes. Leah represents the spiritual. Rachel represents what's revealed. Leah represents what's hidden, in a sense. And when we're dealing from our physical nature, we often go on what we see, not on what we need, not on what we think we need what we see. The eyes blind us to what we really need, because we think we need what we see, or we want what we see. But what we need is something just deeper. Go ahead, Pastor.
No, I'm saying right. If he had gotten Rachel first, that means that he would have been totally religious, totally materialistic. But he got Leah. Now he had to work for what he wanted. And he still didn't see the value of Leah until later.
Exactly.
And when he saw the value of Leah later, he still was so engaged in the physical world or religion until he still could not fully appreciate her, because she became valuable to him and Rachel, especially when she changed the gender of the child in the womb, so she would not have more boys than Rachel.
Well, she was going to have more boys than Rachel already, but she wanted. Yeah, you're right. She wanted Rachel to at least have 2 boys, just like the handmaid, because if Rachel had 1, and even the handmaids had 2 boys each, that would have really been a pickle for Rachel. But in any event, let's see how this plays itself out, because I believe Jacob does come to love Leah in his way. He comes to love Leah, and he comes to respect Leah for what she contributed. So as they got married, he's married to 2 women, and he's now beginning his second round of 7 years. The children start coming. Leah has the first child, and she calls his name Reuben. This is in Genesis 29:32, which means see a son. And when she says, "God's seen my trouble, now my husband will love me," and I'm going to go back over all of her sayings, because you will see what's revealed in terms of her inner nature by what she calls her sons. Same with Rachel. It reveals something of what's going on inside. Because if we don't listen to what she says and what she calls her sons, her children, then it will seem as if Leah is not playing any role except being the bearer of Jacob's sons. In Genesis 29:33, she has Simeon. God hears. Genesis 29:34, she has Levi, and his name means attached or joined. Next, she has Judah, and his name means praise. Then Rachel realized she wasn't bearing any children, and she was envious of her sister. And she told Jacob, give me children. Genesis 30, give me children. If you don't give me children, let me die. Wow. And Jacob in Genesis 32 became kind of furious with her. He says, who am I? Am I God? Shall I take God? Am I God? It is he who's holding back the fruit of your womb. And you're laying this out as if I'm doing it. You're saying, give me children. You're telling me to give you children or you die. I think that began a little crack as it relates to Jacob having Rachel on a pedestal, that this beautiful woman is mine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it begins to show the cracks in that. Then Rachel gave him Bilhah. Her handmaid. And Bilhah got pregnant and delivered Dan. And Dan's name means judge or vindicate. She had another son then afterwards, Naphtali. Naphtali means wrestling. And again, I'm going to pull all this together in a second. Then Leah, thinking, well, I guess now Rachel's got two sons through her handmaid, and all this time it does not mean that Jacob has not been sleeping with Leah occasionally, as he was with Rachel. But Leah thought, well, this is it. I guess, if I'm going to have any more children, I need to, I'll give my handmaiden, Zilpah, to Jacob. And so she did. And Zilpah got pregnant. She had Gad, which means good fortune or success, and Asher, which means happy. And then something else happens after this. Leah's son, Reuben, who is the firstborn, went into the fields and found some mandrakes. And mandrakes were seen back then as an aphrodisiac or fertility potion or something similar along those lines. And he brought them back to his mother, Leah, because again, Leah had given her handmaid to Jacob. And Rachel saw this, and Rachel asked Leah to have her son give her some of the mandrakes. And Leah said, "You've already got my husband, and now you want my son's mandrakes as well." But then Leah made a bargain with Rachel and said, "Okay, I'll give you the mandrakes if Jacob sleeps with me tonight." Rachel agreed. And to make sure Rachel didn't change her mind, when Abraham was coming back, she met him. I don't know if he was in the fields with the flock or wherever he was. She met him, and she says, "I've hired you, and I've, in other words, I've bought you for the price of the mandrakes that I've given Rachel. So this must have been Rachel's night, but now it's Leah's night." So Jacob did go in with Leah, and she got pregnant. And she had a son by the name that she called Issachar. Issachar's name means hire or wage or payment or reward, that kind of thing. And then Leah had another son, Zebulun, which means dwelling. And then, finally, Leah had a daughter named Dinah. And as Pastor intimated, it said that Leah asked that the sex of this child be changed in her because she had a little mercy on her sister, Rachel. She wanted her sister to have, Leah had already had 6 sons, and she wanted her sister to have a son, another son. She'd already had 2 sons through her handmaiden. So Leah then had a daughter. And all it said of Dinah was that in Genesis 30, 21, I believe. Yeah. Afterwards, she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. So let me put all that together right quick in terms of what you can see going on, the machinations, the maneuvering, as George likes to say, of these 2 ladies as they bore children. Listen to this. God has seen my trouble. Now my husband will love me. First son, Leah. God has heard that I was unloved, and he also gave me this son, Leah's second son. Now my husband will become attached to me because I have given him 3 sons. That was Levi, he's his third son. This time, let me praise God. Leah said this after Judah was born. Then Rachel's voice is heard. God has judged me or vindicated me, and he has also heard my prayer. He has finally given me a son. That was when Dan was born through Rachel's handmaid. I have wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. I've won. That's when Rachel's son, Naphtali, was born. Leah speaks again. How fortunate am I? A troop has come, a troop of sons. Gad was born, and that's why she said this. Happy am I, Leah said. The daughters will come, the daughters, and the daughters mean the other women, will call me blessed. And that's when Leah had Asher. God has given me my hire because I have given my maiden to my husband. This is Leah after Issachar, born of Zilpah, was born. God has given me a good reward or a gift. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. That's what Leah said when Zebulun was born. And that dwelling means he will make his permanent home with me. In other words, this was Leah saying, wow, I've given him 6 sons, and he's gonna see me, he's gonna love me, and he's gonna stay with me because I've given him all of these sons. And then Dinah was born, and there was no word spoken over Dinah as she did with her sons as to what was going on inside her, except that we know that the name Dinah means judged or vindicated. Rachel, then, let me stop there. Can you get some understanding of what Leah was going through inside and how she was trying to really earn her husband's love with what she named her son and what she did as it relates to herself and her maidservant, as well as even hiring her husband with the mandrakes. It's almost as she was desperate to have his love. Comments, questions?
Have you looked at how this related to the sons as later on in their lives in terms of their responsibilities to the Creator? Because based upon the conversation that they became based upon the names that they were given because of the emotions that were being experienced at that time. How does that speak to them in the future? Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. What what I was saying was what I did do is I looked at the prophetic blessings in Genesis 48 that came forth from their father Jacob later on in life, which may speak to it a little bit. Judah, who is praised, or praise of God, in Genesis 48, Jacob told him his brethren shall praise, and the scepter would not depart from his tribe, from his people, from Judah. Reuben, the son who's see a son, he said, you won't have preeminence. You're my firstborn, but you will not have preeminence. With Gad, you're my firstborn, but you will not have preeminence. In other words, he was saying to him right then, there are certain things that comes with the firstborn. One of which is he was to get twice as much land as the rest of the brethren. And oftentimes a blessing came with the firstborn in addition to that. And Reuben lost that, and I was going to get into that a little bit later. So what he said was, you're my firstborn, but you shall not have the preeminence. You shall not have what the firstborn gets.
I'm good. That's what you get.
Okay. All right. Okay. Other comments? Anything else you guys saw? It's like can you see Jacob in the middle of these two wives, and it's up to Jacob because he's the patriarch. He's got to deal with and balance these wives and these maidservants.
Miss Barbara?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Rachel and Leah, do we know whether they had conflict before Jacob? Because it seemed like Jacob just exaggerated a problem that was already there.
No, we don't know that. The Bible doesn't talk about that. And it's like, if you think about it, it's like a lot of things. You don't know that there's anything going on because there's nothing there that causes it to surface. In other words, Leah was the firstborn, and the I know what it was. The expectation was that what the sages say, in other words, in other translated works, the sages say that Leah was supposed to have wed Ishmael, and Jacob was supposed to have wed Rachel, something like that, because she was the firstborn, but did not happen. And so I can't definitively say that I'm aware of there being any animosity between the sisters prior to that time. No. Pastor?
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, it says that the reason Laban tricked Jacob is because Leah was older, and she should have been married off already, and he was not allowing Rachel to be married before Leah, and that's why he tricked Jacob, so that Leah could be married first.
The other thing is that what we remember of Laban is that he was I mean, he was a fellow who really loved physical stuff. He loved money, and if he married Leah off first, he'd get sort of a dowry for her, and then to have Rachel on top of that, he'd get more, because he remembered when Isaac Eliezer came on behalf of Isaac to get Rebekah, and all of the riches that Eliezer gave to Laban and his father Bethuel to take his sister away. And so, I'm sure he was looking at his coffers too, and looking at increasing the monies there as well.
Barbara Ron, what is this saying something more about Jacob than it is Leah and Rachel? What if this is saying that he is becoming aware of himself and the conflict is him and not the women, or he's becoming aware of his femininity and he doesn't know how to handle it? Or in those days, the comment that Rachel has with him, that was your woman. You are a woman if you are married and you can have kids, and that was a big issue. It was an issue with Sarah as well. I mean, it was something that was you were looked at in high esteem if you could have children, especially sons. So Rachel looks at that, her sister having all these kids, and her sister is the fulfillment of marriage. And again, as you guys have said, the feminine, the spiritual part of him. So what if this has more to do with him not knowing how to balance those two things that you talked about, the religion and the spirituality of him, and it comes out as conflict between them, and not what it. I'm kind of grasping here, but I just see it a little different, and I'm trying to understand it. I guess so.
Ron, you're really seeing it somewhat similar to what I saw, because one of the notes I made was Leah and Rachel are two aspects of the person of the same person, and yes.
Yeah.
And yes, Jacob had to balance those aspects within himself, because if you will remember, on the tree of life, he's shown as the central column, that of beauty and balance. Okay. Whereas Isaac, his father, was seen as judgmental, and Abraham, his grandfather, was seen as mercy. And so Jacob had to pull those together into beauty and balance. You had to marry those two. When I say marry those two, you had to blend those two so that they were balanced.
Correct. Yeah. That's yes.
So how does that relate to where we are? Because the allegory is about helping us to understand where we are at any given time, isn't it? How does that speak to where we are? Well,
from my perspective, it teaches us that we've got to learn the same thing. We've got to, we are the same. We are balanced. That we have to become aware of that. We have to become aware of the fact that, we've had experiences in our lives when we judged other people harshly. We've had experience in our lives when we were too kind and someone took advantage of us. As we journey this spiritual journey, we have to learn that there has to be a central medium for us: compassion, loving kindness, and too much of one and too much of the other is not balanced. And it's balanced when we are unselfish and that we give loving kindness and we show loving kindness to people. So that when we are too judgmental and we veer off there, that's not showing balance. When we're too merciful, being merciful is like a child who's doing something wrong, and we choose not to discipline them. And in choosing not to discipline them when they need to be disciplined, we're hurting them because they could go on and do something terrible later on in their lives. But because we showed mercy continuously, we overdid that. In other words, we had to learn, we had to experience what balance was, and then live there. And the thing is, we're all trying to do that even now. It's not as easy as it sounds until we begin to experience what it is. I can talk it, but until I experience it, it's a whole different thing. Other comments? Other teachers, you have any response to that? And not even just the teachers, even the participants on the call. Other responses to that? To what Pastor asked?
I like to respond to it. And for years, we have spoken about feminine energy and trying to grasp an understanding and pull all this together. And it wasn't until this year, I think the magnitude of our understanding just grew beyond what we had ever expected. And we gained something in the last year or something in our understanding, and it took us back to beginning. And when we understood the strength and energy and that concept being the human and making that distinction, I think we are pulling now what balance really is. And we're bringing that into the earth. We are looking at the value and the responsibility of the human as far as bringing all worlds together. And so the strength of it is looking at the Leah, looking at the feminine energy and knowing that it is spiritual. And I think that balance is taking shape right now, not only in us, but in the world that we exist in. So I agree with everything Barbara said. And as we have struggled, and our hope at this point are struggling less with these things, we are bringing balance into the universe that has been lacking because the feminine energy has never been awakened fully or appreciated. So when we talk about pulling this together and the wrestling, and I think we are the spearhead for the human or for all of mankind. So the balance is being brought forth as we unravel these things and gain understanding.
Thank you, Ron. Other comments?
I have a comment. This is Audrey. I'm just sitting here thinking that all these scriptures are written, the interpretation of the scriptures that we have are all written from patriarchal perspective, written from the male perspective. So it seems like the whole story focuses on Jacob, but I kind of feel like it wasn't Jacob bringing balance to Leah and Rachel. It was Leah and Rachel bringing balance to Jacob. Because he was like happy-go-lucky. He was sleeping with all these women. He had nothing to worry about. It seemed like it was the women who were doing all the the mental work and all the spiritual work. He just seemed to be just there to, you know, to provide the seed for children, and that was it. So it seems to me that it is the feminine energy that is necessary to bring balance. And I feel like if there is, well, we've said this before, if there is no feminine energy, there is no balance.
You're right, because if you listen to Leah's words as she named these children, it's the feminine aspect speaking and trying to find its place in Jacob. Leah was the one who had the children, but not the one loved. Rachel was the one loved, but not the one who had the children, at least not initially. So all of these are aspects of Jacob, and you're right. I agree with you that he himself, through these wives and handmaids, was struggling with femininity being balanced within himself as well. So yeah, he to this heretofore, as I said earlier, the contribution of the feminine energy, even in the lineage of Abraham, was not necessarily seen in the words of the scripture. That we had to pull that out. We had to understand that. We had to expose that. Same thing with Dinah, Leah's the daughter who was changed, whose sex was changed from that of in the womb, from that of a son to a daughter. Leah had 6 sons of her own that she bore herself directly. And when you look at what 6 means, it's weakness of man. It's the manifestation of sin, those kinds of things. But what did I have a question to you guys. What did Dinah offer as the 7th?
Before,
Balance.
Okay, Ron, I'll come back, Audrey. Ron.
Well, Audrey makes a beautiful observation there, and I just want to mention it, and maybe even talking for a minute. Jacob provided the seed, and that seed was one of religion, one of possession, and everything that he represented that he was wrestling with. But it was the women who set the character for the children. It was the women who named them, and they linked them, or in a way, the names all had something to do with the Creator and their appreciation of the Creator. So I just and I don't fully know what to say more to that, except when she said that, it doesn't say anywhere that Jacob had anything to do with the naming of these children. So looking at the insight of Leah and what she was feeling or going through at the time, she sets the character for these boys. And I just that just kind of stuck out when she said that.
And it's like Jacob had the numbers in terms of the children. It looks like God's promises beginning to, the Creator's promises beginning to come to fruition. But without the women to nurture and to mold the spiritual aspect in there, it would have been like Esau's sons. He had 12 boys. It would have been like Ishmael's sons. I mean, if there was no one who was the bearer or the keeper or the of the spiritual aspect of relationship with the covenant creator, then the question is, what's the point? What's the point? How is that different from any of the other lines directly from Abraham or directly from Isaac through his other sons? So I mean, I agree with you. Pastor, you were going to say something.
The message I get from what you said, Barbara, on Audrey and Ron, is that this is a message. It's a message to everyone in the future. When I say future, I'm talking about those who came after this series of marriages and births. And that message is, when the male is dominant, everything is thrown out of kilter. When the male is dominant, there is no balance. When the male is dominant, there is no foresight. There are no new ideals, and people are not treated in a balanced way. They're judged on religion, they're judged on economics, they're judged on race when males are dominant. When femininity is dominant, what do we see? We see the struggle to pull masculinity back into balance. The struggle with this dynamic that we're talking about is that it took Leah and Rachel struggling to pull Jacob into balance, something that he did not really want. And we see the birth of Diana as the source of balance that was offered, but often rejected. And to this day, we see that same dominance and the same quandary that we are in. I think it is bigger than what we've seen when we talk about religion is the product of not being balanced. The nature of spirituality is corrupted. The trajectory of spirituality is corrupted when there is no balance. And there will never be balance, and there will never be purity of spirituality until everything is back in order. And the order of things begins with respecting the womb for what its purpose is, and that is to birth righteousness, that is to birth balance and respect, and it also births what it takes for us to become human. If we look at it clearly, what we began to see is that from the feminine, from the females, from Abraham on, what we began to see is a constant struggle to bring spirituality to the forefront, with males fighting to shape spirituality in the way that they want it to be, and that is more representative of them. And in doing so, the male has fostered imbalance because he refuses to allow the feminine to be that protector around him. He refuses to accept the reality, the leadership, the wisdom of femininity. And as a result of that, he has placed his strength, his power to lead. That is based on brute strength as well as the idea of being, quote unquote, the breadwinner. This is showing us that the hunter-gatherer is not the wisdom of the household. The hunter-gatherer is the provider, but not the wisdom of the household. The wisdom of the household comes from the feminine. And the guidance of the nation comes from the feminine, as is shown especially with Jacob and Leah and Rachel. This clearly shows us the reason that there are so many females versus males in the church is because that struggle to bring balance is still there, yet that brute strength and manipulation of males keeps them in power. And now here we are, looking at the power of femininity, looking at how things were set up from the beginning. And what are we seeing? We are seeing that the number of females versus males in any congregation is there for a reason, but have not seen that reason until now. And the power of that reason is that it takes all of that great number of females to bring males into balance. Or at the very least, to put a mirror in front of them so they can see the totality of their imperfections when they are seeking spirituality in reality, as opposed to based for the purpose of manipulation. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
one of the other questions I had this week is, and I guess this news about them finding this young lady who was killed by this young man who went off into the Florida Everglades or whatever. But I was just wondering, why is there so much domestic violence going on? Why are so many women being killed by people, by men? I mean, and I know it happens the other way around, but of course, males killing females is more prevalent. But Pastor, you just really answered my question, because we have the church that teaches male dominance and female submission, and that's the whole crux of the problem. When men are told that they're dominant and females are told they should submit, then, that's just the ensuing thing is violence. If women feel like they don't want to submit, what's the man going to do? He's supposed to be the man, so he's going to slap her around or whatever to prove that he's dominant. So, I mean, you answered my question, and it's all because of religion.
Absolutely. And Audrey, to slapping around, I don't want us to leave it there either, because it goes further. There's a type of slapping around that's emotional, and it is deeper and more harmful than physical. Both of them are harmful, but there is a type of subtle manipulation that is very abusive. and no one really wants to talk about the emotional abuse that we constantly see in the church as well as in the home. And I'm talking about the type of abuse that manipulates females into feeling like they have to do X, Y, and Z in order to keep the church functioning. When in reality, it's all about them bringing the money so that everything can be as the male decides that it is supposed to be. And religion does teach that. And it doesn't mean that religion, somebody stands up and says you need to slap your wife. No, it is taught by virtue of saying male dominance. For example, there is a church who teaches their males that they are the ones who are supposed to be spoken to first when someone enters their home. But this is how it works. If the wife is sitting and the male is out of sight, he goes to that male, speaks to that male first, then comes back and speaks to the female. Anything other than that, they're being taught that's disrespect. And that is forced submission. That's what I'm talking about. This state was number one in death of females by males. And this law was not passed about concerning domestic abuse until groups start putting on a billboard. If you want to beat your wife or kill your wife, bring her to South Carolina. It was the embarrassment that brought the law into play, yet it is still not enforced the way it should be. And I know we're not talking about the laws of men, yet the laws of men are imbalanced because men are no different than was Jacob and Isaac. And if you look at those two guys and talk about them being more physical than spiritual, what is the difference today? Their physicality, they want things. They wanted things. They were caught up on the beauty outside, how you look. If that is not speaking to the greed of this society, what is it talking about? Every bit of it starts in the church. And if we don't deal with the church and religion, we will never be able to bring balance, because the government is not the source of imbalance, it's the church. I'm done.
The feminine or energy represents the Shekinah, which is the divine eminence of the Creator, that the divine presence of the Creator here in the physical. And so this is what men are missing in terms of being imbalanced. Also, when they, as you say, mistreat femininity, because when you do that, when you inhibit the freedom of women, and you don't depend, and because they are women, in terms of their femininity, they are intuitive, they in nature, which is what these matriarchs have been showing us. Their intuition says, let's do this, but that intuition is being guided by the Creator. But when a society inhibits that freedom and the intuitive nature, women are not. It sort of like it sends the Shekinah into exile. It sort of separates. It separates. It's like Jacob is being separated when he does not understand that this femininity is part of who I am. and he can't continue to separate himself, excuse me, as long as he begins to understand who he really is, that he's a combination of both. One of the things that has been said is that if you understand the root of an issue, then you can deal with the fruit of the issue. And what we've been talking about today is reflective, although it's about the matriarchs and patriarchs, but it's also about balance. And it's about everything that we're seeing today. And because we are at this root of the issue, and feeding into the macro, that we understand the root of the issue, now we're going to see the fruit of the issue being dealt with. The fruit of the issue of this issue of abortion, this issue of voting rights, this issue of anything that separates individuals, that separates humanity, is going to be dealt with. We're going to see that because the fruit of the issue relates to its root. And the root of the issue has been the subjugation, the demeaning of the feminine aspect of mankind. Other questions or concerns?
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, George.
I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot. Some things I agree with. Some things I understand enough of it to question it. On last week, I don't know if it was Saturday or Sunday, Reverend Richard stated he makes every attempt to say my creator instead of my father. And in working this week, I said our Father's prayer. I said, our Father which art in heaven. And that's as far as I could really get. I didn't know the other part. And at one time, it was mandated in my mother and father's house, and it was complemented by my grandmother and grandfather on my mama's side. The minute that I said, our creator which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, I had a rhythm. I still couldn't complete it now, but I had a rhythm, and I just got farther than saying our Father. So based on what I've heard as it relates to religion, when Africa was conquered by the Europeans, Persia, Greece, Greco-Roman, Europe, they removed everything. They chiseled out anything that represented female influence. So we're in this position because that is taking place. That is taking place. As it relates to feminine energy, the one thing that I adore about feminine energy is how creative I can be with it. And I've had to rely on it in certain situations to keep people dignity. And what I mean by keep people dignity is I'm at a basketball game, and this young lady looks healthy, don't look like nothing wrong with her, yet by other females, they're saying she's getting a tail kick by life, not by a man, yet just by life. And she got 2 sons, and her 2 sons are playing with my baby boy. So I just had to get creative of, if I send my son to the concession stand, them 2 young men got to come back, go with them. And when they would come back with candy, I'd say, hey, man, go get you a hot dog or something. Get you something that's going to give you a good bowel movement. Had to get creative in it. And at the end of the game, I just say, hey, y'all, let's just go get some pizza. And relying on feminine energy, the gender that tampered with the intimacy of it the most was other females. They talking about, hey, she's having an allergic reaction to the medicine. So when we talk about feminine energy, and the tampering of the intimacy of it. Do males do it? Of course we do it. Females, y'all do it too. And in just listening to the lesson that Reverend Richard said, Jacob was acting on his name. And, your name is all you got out here. And how people treat you may be predicated upon how you say your own name.
George, you misunderstood. No,
Reb. I dig what you said. Reb, I know you were talking. Go ahead, Reb, my bad.
All you got is your name. That is not what I was talking about. When we talked about Jacob's name meant supplanter, one who deceives, a deceiver. And we were talking about the deception. These scriptures are not about individual people. These scriptures are about a story, an allegory that's telling a spiritual truth. And the spiritual truth of an allegory has nothing to do with individuals. It has everything to do with us collectively. If it was one individual, then it would not be a problem for humanity. It is a concept that is perpetuated by males. And that concept of perpetuation is that males are dominant, men are the king of their castles, and women are submissive to that, as opposed to understanding that without a female there is no male, and without a male there's no female. They were not created to to be dominant over either one. So we are not talking about individuals. We're talking about spiritual concepts. And when we talk about the material nature of the materialism of Jacob and Isaac, we are talking about the concepts that's being perpetuated right now. Men in churches want pretty buildings. Women don't care. But they are the ones who are manipulated into raising the money to pay for it. This is not something that is in one church. This is in all of them, which means that this is a problem amongst those who carry the burden or carry the a higher, for lack of a better word, level of masculinity. And that in terms of, if you are a man, you are a representative of masculinity. If you're a woman, you're a representative of femininity. If you are homosexual, you are both, and that neither one of them are negative in nature unless they are made that way by the way we approach them and the labels we place on them. So again, when we talk about the name, we are talking about the characteristics of the concept that Isaac put forth. That's it.
Okay. And Rev, thank you for the correction on that. I just like the engagement, man. I look forward to these things on Saturday and Sunday. Cooped up in a doggone truck and got cameras on me. I just like the engagement of it and to hear people's views on things and things of that nature. But like I say, nonetheless, that's the part of feminine energy that I do like, of how creative you can be. And when you ain't got nothing else, you're going to have to know how to rely on. That's it right there. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. George, you did say something that did strike me as well, as it related to, when women denigrate women, it's the same. The root is the same. They don't know who they are. We don't know who we are. So it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man. We denigrate humanity, each other. It's because we don't know who we are. And I think Pastor was saying that the womb births. I think what you say, it births righteousness and it births balance, and the womb it is designed to birth Elohims, balanced entities that are one with the Creator. Any other discussion? Because I do want to go ahead and at least finish the birth, because we haven't gotten to Rachel yet in terms of her natural children born of her body. Other thoughts?
This is
Okay.
Nick.
Go. Hey, Nick.
Hey, thank you everyone for all your input thus far. I just wanted to say, in keeping with the idea that the stories that we see in the scripture are themselves allegory and symbolic of spiritual transformation and growth. When we see these stories of women apparently, quote unquote, scheming or anything else with that connotation as it's usually described, we're not seeing women negatively behaving as such as it would be described by much of religion. We're seeing the sort of receptive and feminine aspects of self trying to understand the best way to give birth to or to create a new evolution or a new growth or a new development of the overall spiritual nature of humanity as a collective and individually, as we all are both individuals and sort of collectively connected at the same time. So all of these relationships between the women that we're reading about, as well as the men, are talking about these aspects of self individually and collectively, and what we have to do in order to figure out how to bring about enlightenment. And all of these extremely sort of detailed accounts of the histories of the development of the quote unquote Jewish people that we read about in the Old Testament in particular are the detailed accounting for how, well, I should say, the detailed account of the path that light and enlightenment has taken through the development of humanity over time to get to where it is now. And that's just something I wanted to put out there to keep in mind as we read these seemingly mundane stories. They seem mundane in the same way that the parables told by Jesus in the New Testament seem mundane. They're symbolic and allegorical of deeper spiritual truths that play out within us individually and collectively. And that's something I think to always keep in mind whenever you start to get bogged down by the seeming drama of it in the in the reality TV sense. That's it.
Thanks, Nick. One of the things I wanted to just point out before we leave Leah is that she represents the spiritual world, the potential, because she's the concealed. She represents the hidden aspect of the spiritual world. But Leah was married with Jacob, and Rachel was not. Jacob fell in love with Rachel, but Leah was buried with her while Rachel was buried along the road to Bethlehem. So I do believe that with Jacob's name being changed to Israel, and the unfolding of what happened with his children and his wives, and the balance that he began to know himself as, that he did come to appreciate Leah and her contribution as well. So we ended with Dinah being born of Leah. But after all of that, Rachel finally got pregnant, Genesis 30:24, herself, and had a son, Joseph. May God add. And then she later, after they left Laban and came back to Canaan, she later birthed Benjamin and called him Ben-Oni, my sorrow, son of my sorrow. But she called him that as she took her last breath because she died in childbirth. Abraham named him son of my right hand. So if you look at what Rachel named her sons and what Leah named her sons, you can see the difference as these two attributes tried to come into balance as one with the masculine energy, which was Jacob. Well, Jacob was both, really. He was the masculine and the feminine part of it. One of the things I also wanted to point out is that as Jacob fled with his household, Rachel took one of Laban's idols. And I say this to say that it plants a seed of what's going to happen later on with Rachel, because Laban caught up with them as they left, because Jacob didn't tell Laban he was leaving. Laban had started treating him differently. Jacob had heard Laban's men talking about how he had gotten all of Laban's wealth, et cetera. And so Jacob heard a message from the Creator saying it's time to leave now. He took his family, all that he owned, and he left. And when Laban caught up with him, Jacob reminded him, I worked for you, man, 20 years, 7 years each for each of my wives, and 6 more for possessions, like the animals and things like that. I've worked 20 years for you. No, I need to go and establish myself. And so Laban didn't say anything else except, fine, but someone took one of my idols. Jacob said, nobody's taken your idol, because he wasn't aware of that. And in fact, Rachel had. She'd taken one of his idols. Now, a lot of people might say, okay, why did she take an idol? Does that mean she wanted to worship an idol? Well, some of the commentaries or some of the tradition will tell you that she took the idol because she didn't want her father to continue to worship the idol. Whatever the reason, she did, and she hid it, and Laban didn't find it, and Jacob said, whoever took the idol, will die. And it was forgotten about because the idol wasn't found. Well, later, Jacob saw that Rachel died in childbirth. Now, he never knew that she took the idol. It's not said that he knew that. But he had pronounced this on the person who took the idol. And in fact, she did. She died in childbirth. I said that to say that we need to be careful about what we pronounce, what we say, particularly when we don't know the whole picture, we don't see the whole picture. That was a judgment that was pronounced by Jacob, but he had no idea it would come to fruition and why and how. So we need to guard our words, particularly when we're doing it out of a judgmental kind of tone, and not out of a loving kindness kind of attribute or tone or perspective. So here we have Rachel, and she named her son. God has judged me and has also heard my prayer. He has finally given me a son. I'm sorry, I'm back at Dan. God has added to me and another son. And then of Benjamin, she says, son of my sorrow. And Jacob changed it to son of my right hand. Again, Benjamin was the only child born in Canaan. The others all were born in Haran or in Isaac's family's homeland. This is going to be important because Joseph, I think I mentioned last week that while Rachel's sons placed Joseph in the predicament of being sold and carried to Egypt, Rachel's son Joseph provided in Egypt, when he was taken, the nourishment and the nurture of the nation of people. And so here you have the balance again. And the thing about that and the beauty of that is that if we had not seen the contribution of both and how each was intricately involved in the outcome of the people as a nation, then we would have judged Leah's sons critically, and we would have judged Joseph critically when he did not let his brothers know who he was and kept sending them back to his father to try to get Benjamin brought there. We would have judged all that critically by not knowing the entire story. So the lesson in it for us again is to be careful of what we say, what we think, and what we do. It's almost 12 o'clock. I think I'm going to stop there with Leah and Benjamin. I'm sorry, Benjamin and Joseph. Any parting thoughts or any parting questions? Hello? Anyone there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a second.
This is Vermel. I have a question.
Yes.
Can we say that Leah and Rachel are an example of our conscience and our subconscious warring within ourselves?
We can say that they are similar to those, that they are attributes that are similar to the role that the conscious and the subconscious plays.
Okay. Thank you.
Because we struggle within ourselves, and they're symbolic also of that struggle within us as well.
right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? If not, we'll see where we go from here tomorrow. I really like to get into the tribes and why we have 12, why the tribes are who they are, and who are they, and see where we go from there. With that, I will say have a super afternoon. See you tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Talk to y'all tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.